Okay. So right. So there's, I suppose, about a third of you put up your hands, and I suppose there's a third of you didn't put up your hands. Okay. So we're just going to use this piece of kit, shears in a quadrant, to try to estimate the cover on this. Do you use this piece of kit?
No.
No. Do you use a plate meter?
No.
No. So he uses his eye. Okay. And ultimately, that's what we would say everybody should get, either using a shears in quadrant or a plate meter to help to calibrate your eye. So that when you do go and we walk into a paddock, like you've just done there, that your mind settles on a figure. And we'll see who's closer and who's high and who's low in a minute. Okay. So the key thing with the shears in quadrant is to place it in a representative spot in the paddock. Like, you note I didn't place it in a very light patch here. Or I didn't place it in a very heavy patch here. You know, you would try to place the quadrant in a representative spot, and I think that's, somebody can counter me now if you think I'm wrong, but I think that's a fairly representative spot. So shears in, you're cutting it to about 3.5 centimeters, which is what we would say is available to the cow.
Just wondering, Noel, say for guys sort of hitting the residuals at the moment, would you ever kind of change the residuals throughout the year, even at the back end or in the spring? Or
We'll talk about that in a minute, yeah. Okay, so we're just gathering the grass in. So I have just a normal plastic bag. These are actually becoming a rare commodity at the moment. We struggled to find one this morning. Yeah, just to make sure the bag is, I have a scales here then. Yeah, that's close enough. Okay. Who does this? Hands up, who actually does this as part of their grass walks? Nobody, so you're all doing it by eye. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Okay, so I'm just weighing the grass. Okay, so it's 245 grams. Okay, so that's the weight of the grass. So now that we know the weight, we want to convert it to kgs of dry matter per hectare. Okay, so part of the formula is the dry matter percentage. So what dry matter percentage do we think is on this? As we're standing here now, what is the dry matter of the grass that you have under your feet, percentage wise?
18%.
18?
Higher, I'd say around 20.
Yeah. 20? Anyone else? How long has this been since this was raised?
27 years.
27 days, okay. So it's a slightly longer rotation length than normal, but when you're in a kind of a rotation length from probably 18 to the low 20s, the dry matter percentage of the grass is normally kind of between 14 to 16%, right? And the range in that, if it's perfectly dry to touch, you're up around 16%. And if it's wet to touch, then when we came out and we did this morning, and basically it was quite wet. There was a dew there, and it was very wet to touch, to be honest. So we only put a 14.5% dry matter on it, okay, because of that. But now it's, my wellies are dry anyway. I'm sure your feet are dry too, so it's bone dry to touch. So we haven't extended the rotation very long. The grass is, you're getting a growth of 60. So look, to be honest, the dry matter of this isn't that much over 16-17% at the moment. Okay, I wouldn't be putting it any higher in the calculation. So, okay. So it's, what do I say, 245 grams, 245 times the proportion of dry matter, which is 0.16, I'm going to, sorry, 245 by 0.16 times 40. The 40 is a multiplication factor because there's 40,000 of those in a hectare. Okay? Okay, crikey. Okay, so 1550 odd. Okay, is the average farm cover here down to that 3.5 level. Okay, so again 1400, 1500 odd. The 80, who said 1800 is a little bit high. Okay, but again, sorry.
You got it very high.
Right, very good, okay. But it was interesting, we did a cut there earlier on and we used 14.5% dry matter, and the calculation came out at 1566. And again, just adjusting for the dry matter and the lighter weight because there was no moisture in it, we came up with practically the exact same figure. So now you know what a cover of 1500 odd at this time of the year looks like. Okay, be cognizant of the fact that at this time of the year there's little or no reproductive tillers. These guys are generally gone. They're all vegetative tillers, and the sward is getting very dense now at the moment. Those vegetative tillers are getting, there's a lot more vegetative tillers coming, and the sward is getting dense. So very often people tend to underestimate the sward because of that. Okay. So so we're conscious of the fact, weather has conspired against us this year in terms of growth for obvious reasons. But there's an aspect to your grassland management that affects growth also. Okay, so there's kind of, as I call it, 4 rules of grazing. Okay, in the day-to-day management of the grass. Anybody tell me what those 4 rules of grazing are in the context of grassland management? Anyone ever go at any of them? No? Okay, so you mentioned one there a minute ago, the residuals. Okay, not as important this time of year. Okay, and probably it's because it's the reason you raised it. We do want residuals down to that. For me, anywhere below at 4. If you're getting it below 4.5 centimeters average across the year, great. Down to 3.5 centimeters, getting it below that. Okay. The problem is that if you allow the residuals to get high, especially in that late April, May, June period, you are going to allow a significant higher proportion of this stem in the sward. Okay, and that reduces the feeding value of the sward significantly. So, well, why are we talking about that this time of the year? If you fail to get the sward grazed out this time of the year, and in the last grazing in October, November, you're going to find it harder to graze it out in the spring. And again, for the second grazing, when you need to graze it out, it's going to be harder as well. So really, I would argue that the residuals should be kept low all the time. Okay? We had a discussion about this earlier on. I would have said, and I think Aidan would have agreed, that on average over for the past probably 10 years, Aidan has been relatively lax in terms of his residuals. Yeah. And really, if he asks his cows now to graze a lot tighter, his cows will underperform. There's no doubt about that, and he's going to have problems. So really, if the residuals are to be got lower here, probably over the course of next year, there's probably going to be maybe a lot of conditioning need to be done with, any surpluses where he's coming in with a mower and absolutely skinning it with the mower. If he skins it with the mower, the cows will be happy to graze down to the height that you've cut. If you cut low, they'll graze low. Okay. Or again, if there's surpluses, or if he's mowing or topping after grazing, again it is topping or cutting as low as possible. Okay. The 3 other golden rules of grazing then are revolve around the 3-leaf principle. Okay, I might get stumped here because there's one anyway. Okay, so a lot of the tillers here have between 2.5 and 3 leaves on them. Okay, and that's the way you want them. You need those 3 leaves there for when you go the cows turn into the paddock, because when that 3rd leaf is in place, what the plant is doing is storing a whole load of water-soluble carbohydrate and energy at the base of the plant. Okay, right down here at the base of the plant, so that when it is grazed off, okay, that's the residual that's left. There's very little leaf area to take energy from the sun that allows it to grow on. Okay, so what it does is it uses up the store of energy that it has in place here to push up that little bit of regrowth. Okay, little bit of regrowth that can come back within 3, 4, 5 hours. And when that regrowth is in place, then that takes energy from the sun and it allows through the rotation in to grow on. Okay, so that's the basis for that. So one of the rules around that is that we have to protect that regrowth. Okay, so again, once the cow is grazed down to the low residual of again 3.5, 4.5 centimeters, they need to come off. Okay, they can't be allowed back on the paddock again, or if you're strip grazing up through the paddock, that you're at the end of the paddock and the water is at the bottom end of the paddock down there, and you're strip grazing them up. They are on their last bit. and they're going back for water, and they have a whole lot of lovely regrowths from the grazings the previous day or whatever, and they're going down grazing those. You're going to stunt growth. You're going to reduce your growth if you allow them to do that. Okay, so that's that. The second one then is that we need to allow time for the grass to recover, so that's typically why we want a 20 odd day rotation length. We want it to go from a low residual up to 3 leaves, so usually through the main grazing season is the 20 days. Okay, it takes 20 days for it to come up. This time of the year we're letting it go longer, because growths are beginning to drop. It takes longer for the 3 leaves to come up. Okay. The last rule then is again pre-grazing covers. So if you allow your pre-grazing covers to go too low, if they're only maybe 900 to 1000, maybe even 1100, for sure 3 leaves won't be up. Okay, so you're going to graze it before it has stored the reserves in the root, before the 3 leaves are up. If it goes too high, once you're going over 15, 16, 17, 1800, the canopy closes in, and then no light gets to the base of the sward, and then the growths are slow after that as well. And that is the one rule that we're willing to bend at this time of the year. Okay, there's a big emphasis, and we'll do it in a minute when we go inside, about building covers of grass now. Okay, so instead of going into covers like this, hopefully, Aidan, if you continue to build covers, you'll be going into 1800s, 1900s, maybe even 2000s in 3 to 4 weeks' time, ideally. Okay, so that's the one rule that we're willing to bend at this time of the year. Okay. And one final thing there then is cows. Aidan, you're letting them into the paddock, you're allowing them in over the whole lot. They're on 24-hour allowances, probably maybe 36-hour allowances, depending on the paddock size. Again, I would argue from now on, as we're building covers and the covers are getting high, that they should be moving back towards 12-hour allowances. Just giving them enough for the 12 hours, asking them to graze it down and graze it reasonably tight, and then move on. Okay, but again, remember, we have to protect the regrowth there then after, so back fencing. And this is where your infrastructure is very important, multiple entry exit points, truck placement, that they can still get access to the truck without going back over the grazed ground. So all of those things are part of your day-to-day management to make sure that you don't suppress grass growth. We need every blade of grass that we have out there at the moment. We need to build covers. We need to make sure that we don't apply a management that actually suppresses growth.